When Japan invaded India in 1944, it was thought to be invincible. But the Japanese advance was halted by a small group of British soldiers, who held off thousands of Japanese troops. This battle would become known as the Battle of Kohima. What many people do unknow is that this battle was fought by just around 2,000 British soldiers against 30,000 Japanese soldiers. This battle went down in history as one of the most intense battles of World War II, and this led to one of the largest offensives launched by the Japanese army during the war. So how did these 2,000 British soldiers defeat 30,000 Japanese soldiers? Stay till the end to find out. But before we begin, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you can be notified whenever I post a new video. In April 1944, the Japanese Imperial Army under the command of Lieutenant General Heiki Tojo launched a major offensive in the India-Burma theater of the Second World War. Their goal was to capture the strategic town of Kohima, which served as an important supply and communication hub for the British forces. The Japanese were confident in their ability to achieve this objective, as they had a significant numerical advantage over the defenders. However, what the Japanese commanders did not anticipate was the fierce resistance that awaited them from the British troops stationed in Kohima. The defense of Kohima was primarily entrusted to the 2nd Battalion of the Manchester Regiment, also known as the Pumas, under the leadership of Lieutenant Colonel Robert Scott. These British soldiers were determined to hold their ground against the invading Japanese forces. As the Japanese advanced, the Pumas' forces took up strategic positions on the outskirts of the town. They fortified defensive lines and prepared for the impending attack. Despite being outnumbered, the British soldiers were well trained and equipped with modern weapons, which gave them a fighting chance against the Japanese invaders. On April 1944, the Japanese assault began. The Imperial Army, comprising various units, such as the 3rd Battalion of the 56th Division, charged towards Kohima with the intention of swiftly overrunning the defenses. However, they soon encountered fierce resistance from the Pumas' troops. As the battle commenced, the Japanese soldiers came under heavy fire from the defenders' rifles and machine guns. The attackers' initial momentum was halted, and they were forced to contend with the British soldiers, who demonstrated remarkable courage and tenacity. The ensuing battle was characterized by intense close combat and hand-to-hand fighting as both sides desperately sought to gain the upper hand. Amidst the chaos and carnage, individual acts of heroism and sacrifice came to the forefront. British soldiers like Private John D. Jenkins distinguished themselves by displaying extraordinary bravery and determination in the face of overwhelming odds. On that day, they repelled wave after wave of Japanese attacks, inflicting heavy casualties on the enemy. The situation became increasingly desperate for the defenders as the Japanese continued to press their assault relentlessly. However, the Pumas' steadfast resistance prevented the enemy from making any significant territorial gains. By the end of the first day of battle, it became evident that the Japanese offensive had been effectively contained. The Imperial Army's early hopes of a swift victory had been dashed, and they were now confronted with a determined and resilient British defense. As the night descended over Kohima, both sides took a moment to regroup and assess the situation. The Japanese, despite their numerical superiority, realized the need to reconsider their strategy, as they had suffered substantial losses and faced fierce resistance from the outnumbered British. Meanwhile, the British soldiers, though exhausted and low on ammunition, were determined to hold their ground and repel any further Japanese advances. The Battle of Kohima had just begun, and the coming days would prove to be even more intense and challenging for both sides. In the following days, the Japanese army continued to launch relentless attacks on the British positions in Kohima, but they were met with equally fierce resistance from the Pumas' troops. As the battle raged on, the defenders' ammunition began to dwindle, and they urgently called for reinforcements. In response to the desperate pleas for help, a small detachment of troops, including elements of the 2nd Battalion, the Durham Light Infantry, were dispatched to assist the beleaguered defenders. Led by Major J.M.L. Hutton, these reinforcements arrived at Kohima just in time to bolster the British ranks and provide much-needed support. Meanwhile, the Japanese, unaware of the reinforcements arriving, continued to press their attacks, throwing wave after wave of soldiers against the British defenses. The newly arrived troops, along with the remaining members of the 2nd Battalion of the Manchester Regiment, stood firm, repelling every assault and inflicting heavy casualties on the advancing Japanese. Despite the ongoing Japanese assaults, efforts were made to evacuate civilians from the combat zone. The perilous journey involved crossing the turbulent and dangerous river Sinu, which flowed below the British defenses. Under the cover of darkness, civilians, including women and children, embarked on this harrowing ordeal, hoping to find safety away from the battle. Assisted by the British soldiers, they managed to navigate the treacherous terrain and reach relative security, providing some respite amidst the chaos of the battle. As the conflict in Kohima intensified, the British High Command recognized the need for air support to counter the Japanese threat. Fighter planes were deployed to engage the enemy and provide crucial assistance to the beleaguered troops on the ground. These aircraft engaged in aerial dogfights with Japanese fighters, aiming to gain air superiority and disrupt Japanese supply and reinforcement efforts. Additionally, the British also utilized air support for ground attack missions, providing crucial firepower to target Japanese positions and reinforce the struggling British defenders. Despite facing numerous challenges, including limited visibility due to inclement weather, the pilots and aircrews demonstrated exceptional skill and courage in executing these missions. They played a vital role in supporting the ground troops and helping to turn the tide of battle in favor of the British forces. With the reinforcements in place and air support arriving, the British forces were able to mount a more robust defense against the Japanese onslaught. The combination of the newly arrived troops, including those from the 2nd Battalion, the Durham Light Infantry, and the resolute stand by the 2nd Battalion of the Manchester Regiment, ensured that the Japanese forces were unable to breach the British lines. The Puma's troops, along with other British units, inflicted heavy casualties on the attacking Japanese, forcing them to retreat and regroup. However, the Japanese, despite suffering significant losses, refused to abandon their offensive. They continued to launch sporadic attacks, attempting to exploit any weakness in the British defenses. Yet the British soldiers remained vigilant and steadfast, repelling each subsequent assault with unwavering determination. The Battle of Kohima had evolved into a brutal and attritional struggle, with both sides suffering heavy casualties. But the Japanese were gradually becoming increasingly demoralized and exhausted. As the weeks passed, the British, although also fatigued and low on supplies, held firm, refusing to give an inch of ground to the enemy. With the arrival of the 2nd Battalion, the Durham Light Infantry, the situation for the Japanese forces became increasingly dire. The additional British troops bolstered the defenses, making any breakthrough even more difficult for the already depleted Japanese ranks. Furthermore, the Japanese began to suffer from dwindling supplies and a lack of reinforcements. As the British air support effectively disrupted their logistics and communication, realizing the gravity of their situation, the Japanese commanders eventually ordered a withdrawal. On June 1944, the Japanese forces retreated from their positions outside Kohima, marking the end of their offensive. The battle had lasted for over 2 months, and it had been one of the most intense and brutal engagements of the war in the Asia-Pacific region. The defenders had successfully thwarted the Japanese invasion, inflicting heavy casualties and preventing them from capturing the vital supply hub. The British, despite being outnumbered and facing relentless attacks, had displayed remarkable courage, tenacity, and strategic skill throughout the battle. The heroic stand at Kohima had not only safeguarded the town itself, but it also dealt a significant blow to Japanese morale and military capabilities in the region. What are your thoughts on the battle? Let me know in the comments section below. And if you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit that like button and share it with your friends. Don't forget to subscribe for more exciting historical tales. Thanks for watching.